In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the carburetor main nozzle on a Honda HRX 217 lawnmower. We'll get started by removing the air cleaner cover. This gives us access to the air filter. And now the air filter simply pulls away from the air filter base. Now we'll remove the air filter base. The base is secured with 2 bolts. Next, we'll remove the fuel line from the carburetor. I'll start by clamping off the fuel line and then using a pair of pliers to release the fuel line clamp. Then I like to use a screwdriver to pry the fuel line away from the carburetor. And now I can remove the carburetor from the throttle linkage. And I'll remove the throttle spring. I've already removed the carburetor from my lawnmower, so I can go ahead and start by removing the carburetor bowl. The bowl is held in place with this nut. You'll also want to have a container nearby to catch the gas that's in the carburetor bowl. With the carburetor bowl out of the way, now we have access to the main nozzle. The main nozzle is just threaded into the base of the carburetor. I'll use a small flat-bladed screwdriver to remove it. I've threaded the nozzle partially out. Now the threads from the bowl screw interfere with the threads on the nozzle. The easiest way to remove this is to take a small wire and stick it through the hole on the carburetor. That'll engage against the threads on the nozzle and allow you to easily thread it the rest of the way out. Now I can just grab it with my needle nose pliers and remove it from the carburetor. With the nozzle removed, now we can access the emulsion tube. The emulsion tube is located inside of this portion of the carburetor. To remove it, I like to use a flat-bladed screwdriver and a pick. You access the top of the emulsion tube through the throat of the carburetor. Now I'll reinstall the emulsion tube, press it in place with a screwdriver, and then screw the main nozzle back into the carburetor. Now I can replace the carburetor bowl and the bowl screw. And I'll tighten it up. Now we can go ahead and replace the carburetor. I'll get started by reattaching the fuel line to the carburetor. And then I'll re-secure the fuel line clamp. Now I can reinstall the throttle linkage to the carburetor. And the throttle linkage spring. Now I can go ahead and reinstall the air filter base. I'll start by replacing the gaskets over the bolts on the air filter base. Now I'll thread the bolts through the governor plate and install the next gasket. Now I'll thread the bolts through the holes on the carburetor. And now install the Isolator gasket against the carburetor. Now I can install the Isolator block with the attached choke controls. And finally, the last gasket between the Isolator block and the engine block. Now I just thread the bolts back into the engine block. And now I'll just replace the air filter back into the air filter base and reattach the air filter cover.